This major iPhone 15 feature will blow you away. We got some new Apple products coming soon. And Apple just revealed their plans for the future. What's up? I'm Royce, and this is Apple Next, where I talk about all the latest and hottest Apple news of the week. So if that sounds good to you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and let's get into it. First up, let's talk about the iPhone 15's biggest feature. And I'm talking about the action button that's supposed to be replacing the classic mute switch toggle on the side of our iPhones. Now, when it first came out that Apple was planning to include this action button, we didn't really know in what way they were gonna go about it. Some thought they were just gonna get rid of the mute switch toggle and the volume rockers and just have one big button on the side that's supposed to be an action button to do different tasks and to control the volume. And then we'd have the power button on the other side. So kind of just a 2-button situation. But according to the latest reports and this video from Unbox Therapy that showed off a dummy version iPhone 15 Ultra, it seems that Apple is just going to replace that mute switch toggle at the top and replace it with a small singular button that they will deem the action button. And I've also talked about in my past videos how this button will probably work in a very similar fashion as the action button on the Apple Watch Ultra, where on there, you could set it to where either one tap on the action button can activate the flashlight, or you can set it to do other tasks if you double tap it. If you created more complicated tasks in the Shortcuts app, you can assign those shortcuts to the action button as well to like really get crazy and fancy with it. And the more I brought it up, I realized actually, Apple has a feature that kind of shows off what the potential of this action button could be in your iPhone right now. And this feature is called Back Tap, and all you need is an iPhone that has iOS 14 installed. So which means if you have an iPhone 8 and up, yes, all the way down to the iPhone 8, you can actually experiment with this feature and try it out for yourself. But I'm not just gonna talk about it, right? I'm actually gonna show you how this feature works using my trusty iPhone 13 mini. So to activate Back Tap, all you gotta do is go to your settings, then go to accessibility, and then scroll down to touch, scroll all the way down to Back Tap. And you can create actions through either a double tap or a triple tap. And the reason it's called Back Tap is because you will be tapping literally the back of your phone to initiate these commands. So let's go and click on double tap, and right away you can see some of the options that are available to us. So I can set my double tap to be app switcher, so let's do that. So if we go back and then select triple tap, I'll set triple tap to open my camera. So now all I gotta do is back tap twice, bam. And now you see my notes for my video. And that's the app switcher. And then if I triple tap, now there's the camera, and there's my very unorganized room. All right, so let's switch this up. So let's go back to double tap and go to flashlight. Now if I double tap the flashlight, bam, there we go. Double tap again, turns it off. And if we go back in, you scroll, you could set it to take a screenshot if you want, to activate reachability, initiate Siri, the volume up and down, all the different accessibility options that you have, the Apple Watch mirroring, that's actually kind of trippy when you do that. And like I said, if you have dedicated shortcuts that you've created in the Shortcuts app, you can really get crazy with this. Like I said, if you have an iPhone 8 and up, and you have iOS 14 and up or up installed, you can already kind of get almost a pre-visualization or a beta test of what this action button could potentially be. And so probably seeing that, you're like, okay, well, if they already have this back tap feature, like why even have a dedicated action button? And I'll tell you, because when they first announced this feature, I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. Turned it on. I had set it up to like open Instagram and do all these like cool things. But maybe after, I would say 3 or 4 days, I immediately turned it back off, because the issue with back tap is your phone gets tapped a lot just through daily life, you know, whether it's you tapping on the phone, or you could just be putting your phone in your pocket, placing it on a table, anything like that. And next thing you know, you realize kind of how sensitive the back tap feature is, and it'll initiate these shortcuts a lot of times when you don't want it to. So I immediately turned it off. So the excitement for it wore off really fast. And I kind of just chucked it up to one of those like cool features that you can do with your iPhone, but most of us probably won't really utilize it. But when you think of a dedicated button here on the side that can do all those things, that isn't so easily activated when you don't want it to be, you can really start seeing the potential here. And having a dedicated button, it's not going to be limited to just double tapping or triple tapping. I imagine they can open it up to long pressing, short pressing, you know, maybe even quadruple presses or something like that. But you'll be in a lot more control just being able to activate certain things just by doing that, you know? And not even just how many times or how long you press the button. I can easily see Apple taking advantage of, you know, certain things like the action button opening or doing certain actions depending on the location you're at, or the time of day, or if you have a certain focus mode set up. And I think Apple's gonna lay the groundwork for this in iOS 17 and then just take it to the next level once the iPhone 15s, the 15 Pros, and the 15 Ultras come out in the fall. So yeah, try out this back tap feature if you haven't yet, and let me know in the comments how you guys feel about this action button coming to the iPhone 15. Next, Apple is leveling up the displays they use in their iPhones and the Apple Watch. So right now, Apple uses OLED or OLED displays on their current line of iPhones. But it looks like moving into the future, they want to upgrade their displays to use micro LEDs or micro LED displays. And with this display upgrade will come less power consumption, so hopefully that means better battery life for future iPhones. The display will have better contrast and higher brightness. So it'll just improve the overall quality of the display and your experience while using your iPhone. But this upgrade won't be happening anytime soon. They're actually gonna start off upgrading their Apple Watch Ultra to this micro LED display in 2025, and then the iPhones will follow after that. So we probably won't see this in iPhones until 2026, maybe 2027. So what does that mean? We probably won't benefit from this until like what, the iPhone 17 or 18, something like that. But the iPhones and the Apple Watch aren't the only ones who are getting display upgrade, as Apple also plans to upgrade the displays on their future iPads, where iPads starting in 2024 will upgrade to OLED. Now the iPad getting this display upgrade is a little bit more interesting because that goes back into the stories I've mentioned about this year's iPads being pushed back into 2024, so we won't see a refresh this year. And a lot of that has to do with the delays Apple's having producing their M3 chip, which hasn't come out this year and has been delayed until next year. Now it seemed at first that this M3 chip delay would push products back to mid 2024 to late 2024. But now it looks like these new iPads could be coming maybe January, February of 2024, which would only be a couple months off from last year's October release, which that type of delay I feel like is a little bit more acceptable. Now, will all the iPads that come out next year get the OLED upgrade? They may save it for that new 14-inch iPad Pro or iPad Ultra that's supposed to have a dedicated special version of iPadOS 17 that makes it more like a laptop. It's gonna have the M3 Pro chip in it. It's gonna be able to hook up to 2 high-resolution monitors at the same time. So I can easily see Apple holding that display upgrade for that dedicated iPad just to make it look even nicer, shinier, fancier, make people really wanna get that over the other versions. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but I just hope we don't have to wait for too long. But next up, while we wait for those iPads, we do have some new Apple products coming, and they're coming in the form of some new headphones. Thanks to this accidental Amazon link, we know that Beats is cooking up some new headphones, one being the Beats Studio Buds Plus, which are the newer versions to the Studio Buds that are out right now, but will come with improved battery life, audio transparency, noise cancellation. With the iPhone 15s expected to have USB-C, I'm sure these will be updated to have USB-C as well. And according to that slipped up Amazon listing, it seems like these Studio Buds Plus are expected to be released on May 18th this month. But that's not all Beats has cooking up, because it seems like they have some new over-ear headphones coming dubbed the Beats Studio Pros, which I'm sure will include all the new tech that Apple has on all their headphones, active noise cancellation, audio transparency, and introducing Hey Siri on these new Pro models. And these Studio Pros will be made in collaboration with Samuel Ross of A Cold Wall and will probably be released sometime later this year, especially if these Studio Buds Plus are coming out later this month. They'll probably want some separation, maybe to put some extra focus and emphasis on these Studio Pros to help them stand out in their marketing. Now let's move these Beats on over to the side, but we're not done with the headphone update just yet. So if you've been asking yourself, hey Apple, remember the AirPod Maxes? What are we doing with that? Are we done? What's going on? Now Apple isn't done yet. They are still working on the next gen version of the AirPod Maxes, but it's looking like that won't come out until 2024, maybe even 2025. Now to fill that time gap, Apple does plan to release new color versions of the current gen AirPod Max. And yes, that could be cool, but honestly, with the price that it costs to buy these AirPod Maxes, I feel like most people really won't care unless, which I think they will actually do because the AirPod Maxes are a couple years old now. I feel with the release of these new colors, I actually expect Apple to drop the price of the AirPod Maxes. I don't want to say significantly, but at least to a price where people who are just like, oh no, there's no way I'm getting those, to be like, well. So the AirPods Max costs, these names, Apple, the AirPods Max costs right now $549. So in order for people to really start turning their heads, I feel like they got to drop it down maybe to like that at least $400, because for Beat Studios, it's like the $350 price range. I don't think they'll go that low, but I can see them doing maybe $400 or maybe keeping about $450, so only really reducing it $100 or $150 decrease. And though that's still very expensive for some headphones, I feel like it's still just enough to make a certain group of people, you know, be like, oh, okay, Christmas, I'll get them. But even if they don't reduce the price, I think Apple's kind of put them in a really good situation, having these kind of 3 different lines of headphone options for people with Beat Studio Buds Plus, and now the Studio Pros, and then the AirPods Max. You know, people really can pick and choose which ones kind of fit their lifestyle more at different price points. Lastly, we gotta talk about Apple's plans for the future. A couple days ago, Apple announced they're finally releasing Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro for the iPad. Everyone was excited. I'm super excited. I've been wanting these apps for literally ever since the iPad was announced. And the best part is it looks like they're getting a lot of the same features, if not most of them, that are from the Mac desktop version on the iPad version. So that's absolutely awesome. But the one thing they did switch up on is that these apps will not be a one-time purchase. You will have to subscribe monthly or annually to use Final Cut Pro or Logic Pro. And the cost to use these apps will be $4.99 or $5 a month individually to use either of these apps, or $50 annually. Now, I know that doesn't sound like much, and honestly isn't a shocker, because we are living in the era of subscription services. Everything's a subscription. You can't own nothing anymore. That's just how it is. But this is a big shift for Apple, because their desktop versions was a set price, one and done, buy it, it's yours for life situation. Final Cut Pro costs $299 and Logic Pro costs $199. And using Final Cut Pro as an example, I purchased the new Final Cut Pro 10 when it came out in 2011 for $299. And I haven't paid a single cent since any of the upgrades that have come out over the course of what, how many years was that now? 12 years ago? I'm not somebody who just randomly jumped on the Final Cut 10 train. Like, I remember Final Cut Studio. I used Final Cut 7. So I came from that generation of Final Cut and moved into this generation. A lot of people thought it was wild and crazy. A lot of people jumped ship, but I weathered the storm. And whether a certain group of people want to admit it or not, Final Cut Pro 10 is actually very powerful. And in my opinion, probably the best tool for a lot of people, especially content creators. But I know that's a different conversation. We're not going to talk about that. Don't flame my comments, you Premiere users. All right, let's get back to the future of Apple and their subscription plans. So the first question you think of is, all right, if the Mac versions of these apps had that one set price, why did they now move to a subscription service for these mobile apps? And I think the answer is kind of easy, because Apple reported their last quarter that they made like, what, $20.9 billion in just their services. So every Apple user that's subscribed to their Apple One subscription, or like if you're on the individual plans, like Apple's making a lot of money, which I'm sure that they're looking at these numbers and are like, our services, that could be what steers the boat going into the future. Products, they die out, you know, they go away, they get discontinued, things like that. But if you put a lot of time and effort into making your subscription services good and worth it, that can transcend time. That's why all these companies are fighting to get your subscriptions, to get your money. They're raising prices. This is where the momentum is shifting, and Apple realizes they can't rely on the money they make just off of their products alone, that one-time purchase. And where they've been fortunate is that they've built a brand where people want to continually support them. So that's how they've been able to kind of keep things rolling. But there's gonna be a point where that just dries up. It happens to every company, and Apple is getting ahead of it by making the moves necessary to make sure that they can survive another 20, 30, 40 years. Now let me talk about where things can get really interesting for Apple and where they can be in a very unique position. So when you look at their Pro apps, right, and having these individual subscription plans, compare that to Adobe Cloud, I mean, there's no comparison, right? Like Adobe, everything you're getting for that subscription, even though it can get pricey, they do have deals if you're a teacher or a student, things like that, which can kind of reduce that monthly price. But for the most part, you're spending a lot of money to take advantage of Adobe's services. But where Adobe has the advantage is with that one subscription, you get access to all their apps. And then you go back and compare that to Apple's offerings, Final Cut and Logic, and they're both separate subscriptions. Even though together it's still cheaper than Adobe, you're getting a way less value than you would subscribing to Adobe Cloud. But I think this is just the beginning for Apple, right? These subscriptions, what I think is going to happen is eventually they're gonna roll these apps into their Apple One subscription, which right now has access to everything, their iCloud storage, Apple Arcade, Apple Fitness, Apple TV Plus. So if you actually look at the tiers, right, they have the individual plan, the family plan, and then the premier plan, right? I can easily see them slipping in a Pro plan, Apple One Pro. Apple One Premier is $32.95. What, maybe they bump this up another 10 bucks, 42 bucks, something like that, that has all the services that we have now. And then now, boom, you now have access to the Pro apps, Final Cut, Logic. As of now, Pages and Numbers, those are still free, but I wouldn't be surprised if they threw those in there too, to now look like more of a competitor with like Microsoft's Office offerings as well. And now you look at $42 a month for literally not just some apps that you can be productive with, but the entire Apple ecosystem. Now compare that to, say, Adobe Cloud. Yes, that's still a great offering for all those productivity apps. But if you look at it from a whole lifestyle perspective, 40 something dollars a month, and you get all the iCloud storage you need for your photos. You get access to your music. You can get in shape with Apple Fitness. You get all the news you want with Apple News. You can watch all your favorite shows on Apple TV Plus, and you can make your own shows and movies with Final Cut, and then you can make the soundtrack to it in Logic Pro. Bam, Apple One Pro. I feel very strongly that this is the direction they're going to move everything Apple has to offer to you in that subscription. And eventually I think that will also include access to Final Cut and Logic on the Mac. And this last thing, if you look at some of their subscriptions, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, they have become multi-platform. You can get Apple Music on an Android device. You can listen to Apple Music on Windows. It's not the best experience, but you can do it. You can watch Apple TV Plus on a Roku, on a Samsung Smart TV. So I wouldn't be surprised as well with Final Cut and Logic going subscription if we see Final Cut and Logic on Windows. Crazy thought, I know. And as a one-time purchase, going multi-platform didn't make sense. But now getting a continuous flow of revenue coming in, it now makes more sense to be like, hey, you know what? Let's throw these apps on Windows, all right? Let's see who actually wants to use it over there. But yes, Apple's going all in on subscriptions. It's gonna run the world. Let me know what y'all think. Is it good? Is it bad? And that's all Apple news I got for the day. I'll catch y'all in the next one.